thanks so much for joining me today, Jerry. So Jerry Downing, I'm just going to introduce you a little bit to our viewers. So Jerry Downing is a retired bus driver and political activist for over 40 years. Jerry was born in West Cork in 1950. He was influenced by Tom Barry's guerrilla days in Ireland, where the leader of the flying column, the Third West Cork IRA Brigade, related the very successful campaign. He and his men and women fought against black and tan terror sent to Ireland in the early 1920s. Jerry joined the Workers' Revolutionary Party in 1976 and voted to expel its leader, Galway. Jerry Healy in Galway, and the leader was Jerry Healy in 1985. So Jerry was the founder of Socialist Fight in 2009. And also, every issue has carried a list of Irish prisoners of war since then and has reported on the struggle in Ireland. With a few more contacts, Jerry has formed the Irish Republican Prisoners Support Group in 2010, and also conducted many public meetings and pickets in front of the Irish Embassy and the Ministry of Justice on behalf of these prisoners, with demands that they be given political status. And the August 2010 Magabary agreement on the ending of forcible strip searching and other issues be implemented to this day. This agreement has not been implemented. Right. So my first question, Jerry, is in relation to the Irish community within the British context. So the first ever terrorism legislation introduced in the UK was for the Irish community, although, mind you, treason existed before then. So what is the root cause of political violence of the Irish community? And if we can speak a little bit about foreign policy and perhaps bring about a nuanced discussion, although this doesn't really take place much, and there are some people within British society that don't even know what the 32 county movement is, which is quite appalling. And also the 32 county movement, if I may add, is obviously a non-paramilitary faction, and it's a legal political dissent group. So Jerry, if you can explain.
Okay. The Irish community was subjected to the Prevention of Terrorism Act in December of 1974, following the pub bombings in Guildford and in Birmingham. This was draconian legislation, which had sweeping powers of detention, sentencing, and exclusion from certain parts of the United Kingdom of named Irish people. But it should be stressed here that the legislation itself was bad, but the way that the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6 prisoners were actually framed by the British state was far more effective in intimidating the Irish community. Both the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6 were completely innocent of the crimes that they were charged with. They spent 16 years in jail for these crimes. The whole Irish politically active leaders of the Irish community were very well aware that they were innocent. And of course the British political establishment knew they were innocent as well, and so did the prosecutors, and I would say in their trial, and I would say also that several of the members of the jury must have known they were innocent as well. The evidence against both in both cases was absolutely minimal, and the Birmingham 6 appeared at their first court appearance, and their face was absolutely pulped to pieces. They had obviously been severely beaten, and yet the force by the police. The police said that it was the army that did it. The army said the police did it, and nobody was convicted in the end. of that. But the fact that their confessions were then accepted from what had obviously been after they had obviously been tortured just exposes the whole hypocrisy of the British judicial system. I would mention that having convicting innocent people has a far more terroristic effect on the whole community than convicting people who have actually committed or planted a bomb or of some such thing. And the fact that everybody knew they were innocent meant that the movement in support of the struggle in the north of Ireland practically collapsed over the next year or so. They say that there was several common or branches of Sinn Féin in Birmingham. After about a year, there was none left. Everybody was absolutely terrified. They were regularly, you would see written on walls, "Hang the IRA," that kind of graffiti. And I myself encountered blatant anti-Irish racism from a doctor, in fact, when I fell seriously ill in August of 1974. So what is the root cause of the violence in Ireland? That's part of that question. Well, the root cause of the violence in Ireland is a partition of Ireland. Ireland was partitioned by terror in the years between 1920 and 1923. The Black and Tan terror in the south of Ireland, and in the north of Ireland there was a particularly heinous incident happened in July of 1920. Edward Carson, the unionist leader, made a big speech on the 12th of July on the anniversary of King Billy's victory at the Battle of the Boyne, and he said Ulster will fight and Ulster will be right, and he made a great demagogic speech. Less than two weeks later, there was a huge pogrom against nationalist workers in the Belfast shipyards and against women workers in the linen factories. They were all driven out from their employment by the use of what they call Belfast confetti. Belfast confetti is big nuts and bolts, metal discs, and huge ship rivets from the shipyards. They killed 53 people in this pogrom, and that is the basis of the Northern Ireland state that established its character right from the beginning. Therefore, the right to discriminate against nationalist workers is built into the very essence of that state, and it is, of course, an illegitimate state that has no right to exist because it is built on that basis.
I'm happy with that. So can we move on to the next question?
Oh, I just to follow up a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure.
James Connolly was the revolutionary leader of the Irish Labour movement, who participated in the 1916 uprising and was executed for his part by the British on the 12th of May 1916. There are two quotes from him that exactly characterises what the coming partition of Ireland was going to mean. He said, "But it is no good blaming it, that is loyalist reaction. So also no good but infinite evil can come of truckling to it. Let the truth be told, however ugly. Here the orange working class are slaves in spirit, because they have been reared up amongst a people whose conditions of servitude were more slavish than their own. In Catholic Ireland, the working class were rebels in spirit and democratic in feeling, because for hundreds of years they found no class as lowly paid or as hardly treated as themselves." And the second quote is his most famous quote, I would think. This is often repeated. "Such a scheme for the partition of Ireland was that agreed by Redmond and Devlin, who were the leaders of the Irish party in Westminster. The betrayal of the national democracy of industrial Ulster would mean a carnival of reaction both north and south, would set back the wheels of progress, would destroy the oncoming unity of the Irish labour movement and paralyse all advanced movements while it endured. To it Labour should give the bitterest opposition. Against it Labour and Ulster should fight even to the death if necessary, as our fathers fought before us. And we will come on to this later, but the Good Friday Agreement then reverses Connolly's position and basically accepts the partition of the country and the Loyalist veto.
Exactly that. So, what is the similarity in relation to the anti-terrorism legislation passed prior to the War on Terror? So, targeting the Irish community at that time, and now post-War on Terror, predominantly targeting the Muslim community. And what are the similarities in the struggle? What observations from, I mean, you've lived through the struggle, and what similarities in the struggle are there between the Irish political prisoners and the Muslim political prisoners, but not only the prisoners, but also the communities, the racism that they face, the overt racism, the institutional racism, how the politicians treat, my community and how they treat your community. If you can draw some parallels.
Okay, I'll try to do that. First of all, on the terror legislation, the Prevention of Terrorism Act, though draconian, was always temporary, and it had to be renewed through Parliament after either a year or 3 years. It therefore had to be endorsed by the Parliament, and when the struggle in the north of Ireland basically came to an end, or came to an end to that phase, much of the legislation was allowed to go into abeyance. However, from the year 2000, just before the 9/11 and the War on Terror, a new form of legislation began to be passed. These are the anti-terrorism laws. There are 11 separate pieces of legislation called anti-terrorism laws since 2000, and particularly since 2001, and they have grown progressively more oppressive and progressively more inimical to human rights. So for instance, the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the Anti-Terrorism Crime and Security Act of 2001 enabled foreigners to be detained as terrorist suspects indefinitely. So if you were a terrorist suspect, you could be detained indefinitely. Prevention of Terrorism Act in 2005 established the control orders, which was a form of house arrest for terrorist suspects. Remember, if you're a terrorist suspect, you don't need to be convicted of any crime, or they will say that the security forces have certain information about you which we cannot reveal to the public, etc. So these laws could be impacted on that. And then more worryingly, of course, is the Terrorism Act 2006, and that instituted a crime of glorifying terrorism. Of course, this is a very loose term. What do you mean by glorifying terrorism? And that led on then to the situation where you have people arrested and charged with vague offences, and these kind of offences can result in indefinite detention. I'll come on later to the case of Mohammed Hamid, but the general principle is now established in these 11 pieces of separate legislation. As I say, terrorism is a very wide definition, political. Basically, what they were seeking to do was establish an absolute equation between political sympathy for the aims that terrorism groups might have, and equate that with support for the method they use. Say, for instance, if you supported, as an Irish person, you supported the IRA and its aims of unifying Ireland and driving out the British from Ireland, you could then be charged with supporting terrorism. Or if you were a Kurdish national who supported the right of the Kurdish people to have a nation state of their own, and agreed with the PKK to that extent, that could then be drawn as an equation that you supported bombing public places, which the PKK have done in fact. So you're making illegitimate and terrorist offences political views which are basically anti-imperialist and run against the principles that the British ruling class and the American ruling class want to impose in the world.
And that could be kind of, if we were to speak about kind of the idea of like supporting a nation state, there's many Muslim prisoners, political prisoners here in the UK that actually went to fight, you know, in Kashmir as well. The idea of kind of fighting the Indian occupation and things like that as well. So, and also even Afghanistan, during the occupation of Afghanistan as well, and they are imprisoned today. So, so what are the similarities in the struggle between, now very specifically, between the Irish political prisoners and the Muslim political prisoners?
Okay, I'll draw one very close relationship in our own experience as the Irish Republican Prisoner Support Group. Back in 2013, we organised a public meeting in London, and we got a high-profile what they call dissident Republican speakers, although they don't like to be called dissidents, real Republican speaker from Northern Ireland, and we were approached by a woman called Yasmin Cass. Now, Yasmin Cass is the daughter of Muhammad Hamid, and she came and spoke quite powerfully at the meeting on behalf of Muhammad Hamid, and she pointed out exactly this, that Muhammad Hamid had committed no crime. He had not planted any bombs, he had not done any act of terror anywhere, but he was charged with radicalizing his followers. And it is David Farrell, the QC prosecuting, told the court the true intention behind Muhammad's camps and talks were clear. It was nothing short of a grooming mechanism for disaffected Muslim men, slowly and sometimes subtly preparing them and radicalizing them for jihad. So that was the line of argument that the prosecution used, and Muhammad Hamid was sentenced to 7 years trial, but also he is detained indefinitely, because he is detained at Her Majesty's pleasure until he can prove that he is no longer a threat to this establishment. So this new form of imprisonment is then instituted in which people can be held indefinite until the Secretary of State or the government decides that they are no longer a threat. That is a life sentence. Therefore, because as soon as somebody proposes to release Muhammad Hamid, for instance, you will get the Sun and the Daily Mail and the Express mounting a huge campaign. How dare you release the terrorist who in fact has committed no crime at all. At the same time as Muhammad Hamid or Yasmin Cass was campaigning for her father, there was a man called Stephen Marney. Now, Stephen Marney had been picked up by the police in the north of Ireland in November of 2012. He's a member of IRG, which is a left-wing Republican socialist split from Sinn Féin, who campaigns very strongly for the Republican prisoners in the north and the south. And he was charged basically with the same charge, supporting terrorism. And they raided his house, and they took basically as evidence flyers, handout leaflets, etc., that were supporting the prisoners, and they said, look, these are evidence. But of course they were evidence of political support for the aims of the people. And this conflation between these two things held Stephen Murney in jail for 15 months until he came to trial, and at his trial he was fortunately found innocent. But he was detained for 15 months on basically charged with political sympathy with the aims of Republicans, which are to expel the British Army from Ireland and to unite the country. That is what they are. Of course, Republican socialists also seek to do this by socialist methods, by overthrowing capitalism as well.
So he was detained in the UK.
He was detained in the north of Ireland.
Oh, Northern Ireland.
For 15 months in Maghaberry prison itself, where he endured much strip searching and torture and beatings at the hands of the prison warders there.
And there's still in British prisons there are strip searches and other kind of like really degrading treatment of prisoners as well existing.
Yes, in Maghaberry prison, which is the main prison in the north of Ireland, which holds the Republican prisoners, there is constant strip searching, constant denial of rights like prison visits, etc. There is a thing called the boss chair. The boss chair is something that is used to scan the body of a prisoner. It is acceptable in the state of Texas for prison visits, but it is not acceptable in the north of Ireland. Although the 2010 Maghaberry Agreement between representatives of the prisoners and the governor and the British state itself came to agreement that it should be used. The prison officers themselves said, no, we will not use it, and actually at one point the governor said to use it, and they said, look, we're not answerable to you, we're answerable to the Secret Service, the MI5. That's who tells us what to do, and we will not use this. So the constant strip searching is a method of control and humiliation. The boss chair is acceptable everywhere else, so that you're not hiding something in any body orifice or some such thing. It can reveal all that.
And that contributes to a lot of trauma, I think, when you speak to ex-prisoners and you say, what kind of, if you speak about your experience in terms of like what trauma they face, they do speak a little bit about kind of, strip searches and that's within British prisons and how humiliating it is. So I can't even imagine how intensified it must be.
Well, it's not in all British prisons. It's only in Maghaberry prison itself, and in also it was practiced in the women's prison in Hydebank. Oh, wow. There was at one stage 3 women prisoners held in Hydebank. There's only one now, but it was regularly practiced there as well, which is very humiliating and absolutely unnecessary. It has a political intent and nothing else.
So my next question is, some Irish political prisoners were given amnesty, and I don't think this will be the case for many Muslim prisoners doing life here. And why does the British give certain prisoners amnesty, and what can the Muslim community do to support and work towards the liberation of those prisoners that are facing and serving life sentences?
Oh, this is a very political question, so I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
The prisoners in the north of Ireland and in British jails were given amnesty on the foot of the Good Friday Agreement of August 1989. The Good Friday Agreement was basically an agreement between the Sinn Féin leadership representing the IRA and the British state to cease the armed struggle, as it was called, to hand over their stockpile of weapons and from then on to pursue their aims through Parliament, through parliamentary methods. But crucially, it wasn't just that. It accepted what they call the loyalist veto. It accepted that the problem in Ireland was not the British Army occupation of the north of Ireland. It was the fact that the loyalist community would not accept peacefully joining a united Ireland. Having separated these two inseparable questions, actually, the courage of the leaders of the loyalist community, as they're called, is absolutely established by the presence of the British Army. In fact, at every turn in the situation in Ireland, say back in when Irish self-determination was first mooted in 1914, you had what was known as the Curragh Mutiny. In February 1914, the Liberal government proposed the Government of Ireland Act, a Government of Ireland Act that would allow Ireland a certain amount of autonomy. The loyalists in the north of Ireland refused to accept this and mobilised and ran weapons actually from Germany, the Larn gun running, which they were allowed to get away with. And then the British Army that was located in the Curragh camp in the south of Ireland, west of Dublin, was about to be ordered north to suppress the rising of the Orangemen, and the army refused the government instructions and mutinied. They said they would. So, and this was, of course, encouraged by the Tories, who were the opposition at the time, and the high officers of the ruling class. They simply would not tolerate anybody who would crack down on what was treasonous acts, in fact, of the loyalists, and these themselves were treasonous acts, which in an army, if you disobey the orders of the government, then that's treason, and you're liable to be in fact executed. But instead of being executed, they were rewarded with positions in the House of Lords and then praised by the establishment. So that kind of set the tone for what was, in fact, the British state itself would not allow the unity of Ireland. You had to defeat the British state before you could unify Ireland, and the loyalist community understood this, that the British state was on their side, and that reinforced their bigotry and what is the essential feature of loyalism, which is the right to discriminate. It was what they call a Protestant parliament for a Protestant people, actually quite similar to Israel, which is a Jewish parliament for a Jewish people, is it not? It is as illegitimate as the state of Northern Ireland, in my view.
Exactly that. So, in relation to the Muslim community, the amnesty question, if you can kind of touch on that a little bit.
All right. Those prisoners got their amnesty. However, the question of Muslim prisoners is in a much wider context than that of one nation. The context of Muslim prisoners is to do with the war on terror, and the war on terror is basically something that the American ruling class were seeking to do long before 9/11, and now seize the opportunity. The American ruling class know that their empire is in decline. They know that they're losing ground to the Chinese, to the BRICS countries, etc. And they seek to reverse this. One of the main fears of the American ruling class is what they call the de-dollarization of the world economy. That the dollar would no longer be the trading currency of the world. Gaddafi was proposing to replace the dollar. Saddam Hussein was proposing to replace the dollar. The BRICS are now proposing to replace the dollar as the world trading currency. This is what the American empire rests on, is that the majority, 85% of world trade is conducted in the dollar, and they are therefore able to control that. If they lose control of that, they lose control of the empire that they have. And therefore, the wars in the Middle East, the wars in Libya and Syria and everything else, are basically wars to preserve the American empire to its global hegemony, and to reverse the attacks on it. This is not a conflict that can be solved easily, or will not be solved, and in my view, before the overthrow of capitalism itself, this conflict can't be solved. So individual cases you can fight, but any type of a global Good Friday agreement like Gerry Adams got for the North of Ireland is not possible, in my view, for prisoners. For the life of me, I can't see why.
It's quite global. It's a global war, isn't it?
It's a global war, and of course it is not simply directed against the Muslims. We saw what happened in the Ukraine. This is simply against the Russian-speaking people of the.
But even that has quite a huge Muslim population. The Muslims was central to even that debate, wasn't it? The Tatar Muslims and everything. So.
Yeah, they were central to that. But
they've been accused of being terrorists as well.
Yes,
so there's all sorts of quite nuances within that political context as well, I suppose. But so actually, I don't really want to get into this, but I thought I'd touch on it a little bit. But you did kind of propose to me in earlier discussion as well, and I know that you were a member of the Labour Party, and although we will have strong disagreements because I don't agree with aligning with the establishment parties at all. I have a very strong stance against this, but you do think that, and I'm very surprised that you think that, because obviously you seem to hold very strong views in relation to Sinn Féin and kind of the disappointments there. But then the Labour Party, really? The same party that took us to the Iraq War, the same party that triggered off the war on terror, same party introducing things like the terrorism and security bill in 2015 that essentially criminalizes, it's thought crimes, like, it's and the prevent strategy and things like this. I mean, I think that they're very soft on Zionism, and it's all sorts of other more nuanced political ideas of, integrating within the system, and I don't advocate that in any way, shape or form. And also, I believe that they suspended you, didn't they?
Well, no, they expelled me. In fact, they expelled me twice.
But you still advocate in favour of
Right, let me explain. They expelled me in August 2010, basically for supporting Jeremy Corbyn's bid for leadership. Yeah. And they said I was supporting an organisation whose aims were contrary to that of the Labour Party. That's how they put
That's
it.
exactly how I see it.
And let me explain how this went.
Yeah. I think it's good.
I appealed against the expulsion, and I said, look, there's been many leaders of the Labour Party. The original founder leader, Keir Hardie, had views of revolutionary socialism. Many in the Labour Party have views of revolutionary socialism. I think I'm entitled to be in the Labour Party and hold those views. And they accepted my appeal, and I was readmitted into the Labour Party. However, some months later, a Tory blogger called Guido Fawkes produced this evidence. They first of all accused me of supporting ISIS, which was false.
Ludicrous. Let's get real.
Which was false, actually.
Of course it's false.
What I said was I didn't support the United States bombing ISIS, which is a different thing entirely. But I didn't support anything that ISIS were doing. But I definitely wasn't going to support the United States bombing anybody. I was accused of supporting the 9/11 bombers.
And that was completely
this
false.
This was false as well, but I did say I understood what drove them to do it because of what the United States had done in Muslim lands. And the third thing that I was accused of was anti-Semitism for not supporting the state of Israel. Well, this is false because what they do is they equate supporting the state of Israel with opposing the state of Israel with opposing Jewish people in general. Exactly. Now, for the Labour Party itself, you see, the Labour Party is a contradiction. The Labour Party gets the support of the working class, and it's now mainly funded by the trade unions. Its leadership have always been imperialist and pro-capitalist and hostile to the working class. But it does have a base. And that base creates great problems at certain points. And through it you can mobilise people to oppose that leadership. when Corbyn was elected, it created a great problem for the whole British establishment. A British general said that Corbyn might have to be taken out if.
I think that was hugely exaggerated.
It's
hardly a threat.
Yes, but it wasn't Corbyn they were afraid of. It was the base that elected him.
Yeah.
That they were afraid of this leftist surge, and to that leftist surge that you must turn. Back in the 1920s, the Labour leaders were no better on the question of Ireland than they are now. In fact, they were worse in many ways. But they had huge problems with the sympathy of the British working class for the actual struggle in Ireland, and they had to go to great lengths to subvert conferences and to motions and everything else, and to sell out the struggle. So such was the sympathy, particularly between the middle of 1920 and the middle of 1921. And if you want to mobilise a mass base, what I would say, if you want to replace individual...
You don't have to do it through the party.
Well,
you don't have to, and I don't think it's successful personally. I think that believing in this concept that joining the institutions, you can change them from within. In fact, if anything, the institutions change you. You have to compromise, and we've seen that in Corbyn. We have seen that in Corbyn. It's very unfortunate. I mean, I knew Corbyn from my Stop the War days. You know, I was working in the office within Finsbury as well, and I know that Corbyn was. I know him prior to the whole Labour leadership, and the guy he is now, I don't recognise him. So
he is an exceptionally weak political character. There
exactly.
is no doubt, and this current capitulation to the anti-Semitism onslaught by Zionism and is particularly disgusting. In fact,
it hurts his funding as well. I think
it obviously does, but nonetheless, I mean the leftist surge that elected him is still there. And we still need to relate to it. Now, I cannot, as I say, I was expelled from the Labour Party without the right of a hearing or without the right of appeal, so I couldn't make my case. And these were institutions that were set up under Tony Blair.
Yeah.
But sparking a mass movement with the support of the entire working class is a political task. And through the trade unions, and the trade unions go into the Labour Party, that you can work there in order to achieve your aims outside of the mass party of the working class.
How does that go down in Ireland? Is it seen as an imperialist institution?
Well, the Labour Party leadership is, of course, but the Labour Party members are the working class. They are the people that vote for it. They are the members of the trade unions that are affiliated to it. It definitely is an arena of struggle. Whereas if you're a small left-wing group, say, trying to influence the masses, you won't get the ear of the masses.
There's a lot that's being done in Ireland as well through kind of grassroots campaigns in relation to kind of, again, exposing the government for being complicit and weak as well, you know, and it can be done here in the UK, and I think that the Muslim community are very good in this regard. You know, we've got organisations like Cage exposing British intelligence complicity in relation to drones and Guantanamo and things like this, and it's that information, isn't it? And it's a lot like what we're doing today, you know, drawing kind of in people like yourselves who have a common understanding and things like this. I mean, it's definitely a nuanced discussion to have. So our next question is in relation to the Craigavon 2. So why is this, for those that don't know about the case, so why is this a miscarriage of justice, and what is the current legal action being taken?
Well, the miscarriage of justice is over the shooting of a police constable whose name was Carroll. Basically, the two have been in prison for 8 years now, and there's very little evidence against them. The majority of evidence is provided by a witness who cannot be named, called Witness M. Witness M claimed to have seen one of them John Wotton at the scene of the crime, but he was at such a distance and his eyesight is of such quality that he couldn't possibly have seen him. There are a number of other anomalies in the whole trial, but basically these two and the wife of the policeman who was shot has admitted that she doesn't think these people shot her, but they have been imprisoned and under what is implicitly this common enterprise. That they were close to the people who did it, they knew the people who did it, and therefore they were responsible. Now that's a law which was called the Joint Enterprise Law. In February of this year, the Supreme Court found that law had been misapplied for the past 30 years. So on the 16th of this month, there was a joint demonstration, which I suppose you were at, by the Joint Enterprise Common Purpose organisation and supporters of the Craigavon 2 and the Irish Republican Prisoners Support Group were on it as well, to Downing Street to protest this case and to ask for its opening on the basis that it was simply the implied common purpose that has imprisoned these two, and not the actual evidence itself, which is almost non-existent against the two.
I was actually in Dublin. That's how I knew about the campaign. And when I was in Dublin, we had the campaigners come from Northern Ireland, from Belfast, down, and they spoke at our meetings that we organised. So yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a really important case, and hopefully we get to work with them a lot more. And we're looking to kind of, I know I've spoken to people like Joanne, and we're looking to try and accommodate them in London as well if possible.
Yes.
So yeah, the next question is, so I would argue that the Muslim community are inspired a lot by the Irish political prisoner struggle. For instance, Bobby Sands, why was he pivotal for the Irish political prisoner resistance? Why is he an inspiration, and are hunger strikes effective? Because we've seen they are practiced in British prisons as well, and also Guantanamo Bay, and are hunger strikes effective?
All right. Well, hunger strikes are a very difficult subject, but basically the effectiveness of any hunger strike depends on the movement that is taking place outside. For instance, Ireland's most famous of Ireland's hunger strikers was Terence MacSweeney. He was an IRA commander, Lord Mayor of Cork, and also an MP. And he went on hunger strike in Brixton Prison in 1920, and he died in October of that year. And there was a huge funeral. All the leaders of the British Labour Party attended the funeral service in Southwark Cathedral, although all of them were bitterly opposed to him and to everything he stood for. And the reason they were obliged to attend was because of the sympathy of their members and the fact that it had become an international case. The whole world reported on it, and he had Ireland's biggest funeral, I think, until Bobby Sands' funeral itself in 1981. So it was the actual movement that was taking place that the hunger strike represented. That's important, and likewise with Bobby Sands, the whole campaign had developed. They had a feeling that it was developing when those 10 men went on hunger strike at that time. There was a huge response because they struck it just at the right time, and well, I would argue that the hunger strike itself provoked a revolutionary situation throughout Ireland. So such was the enormous sympathy for it in 1981. At other periods and at other times there have been hunger strikes, but they haven't produced those results because they come at the wrong time and in the wrong circumstances. So hunger strikes are well, there is a question. You could say that the hunger strikes never achieve anything. It was best for the revolutionary fighter to remain alive and continue to fight. But you have to respect people who are prepared to do that, and who then ignite a movement that is so powerful. Bobby Sands himself, he's became, of course, an international hero for the anti-imperialist struggle. He's got parks and streets named after him throughout the world. Most famously in Tehran, where Bobby Sands Avenue stands on the same street as the British Embassy, much to their chagrin, as you might appreciate. But it was the anti-imperialist nature of his struggle, and also, of course, his writings became very popular, and the songs he wrote, and everything else, and they're all imbued with the spirit of anti-imperialist struggle against the British Empire, and that's why he became such a famous character.
Yeah, exactly that. Let's talk a little bit about the domestic situation in Ireland at present. It puts a lot of what is being said in context. So essentially, the Good Friday Agreement has been described by some as negotiation with terrorists, and by others, it has received criticism for pacifying the Irish resistance. What is the present government of Ireland doing for the Irish past and present political prisoners? And if I may add, when I was in Dublin, the Irish political prisoner campaigners weren't happy with the government and what they were doing, the present Irish government and what the present Irish government is doing. And if I may also add, in terms of the Muslim community, I think that joining things like, Labour and things like having this kind of, token like Sadiq Khan, it pacifies our resistance within the UK actually. So yeah, if you can kind of speak a little bit about that.
All right. The government of the south of Ireland is contrary to what they like to present themselves, is not a product of the 1916 uprising. The government of the south of Ireland is a product of the 1920 Government of Ireland Act passed by the British Parliament. It came into existence courtesy of the British government, and it is in fact one of the first neo-colonial governments, what later became the world's neo-colonial governments, entirely subordinate to British imperialism. Its crackdown, its counter-revolution between 1920, late 1921 and 1923 against the real Republicans was absolutely vicious. The atrocities were beyond belief. Much worse than the British had done themselves during the War of Independence. So that formed the character. It holds some scores of Republican prisoners of war themselves in Portlaoise prison. It does basically nothing to assist the unification of Ireland beyond mere words. And it was obviously totally opposed to what was the popular sympathy of the anniversary of 1916 when I was in Dublin for that. For instance, they erected a huge banner in College Green outside the old parliamentary building, Grattan's Parliament of the late 18th century, and one of the figures on that banner was John Redmond, the leader of the Irish Labour Party, who condemned the 1916 uprising as a criminal folly, was totally opposed and totally condemned them, and supported the execution of the 1916 leaders. So to put such a figure in celebration of the rising shows the character of the government itself. So it is a government that is totally dependent on Britain, ideologically now as well as economically and politically. It is what I would say. It's a repulsive government who simply wish to carry out whatever it is that the British state wants.
Exactly. So, in terms of foreign policy, what is the root cause of radicalization? So, foreign policy, of course, is the root cause of radicalization within the Muslim community, and this was indicated to Blair and the Blair government before the Iraq War. And Blair was told that this would likely lead to blowback within the UK. That military intervention would likely lead to blowback. And there are legitimate grievances that exist as a result of military intervention, of course they do. And the British government claim that they want to put a stop to radicalisation by introducing things like, the draconian measures of prevent strategy and the so-called Counter-Terrorism and Securities Bill 2015 that focuses on the phenomena known as so-called non-violent extremism. And so basically, did something similar exist, prior to the war on terror? Did it exist to pacify the Irish community and depoliticize them?
Well, the conflict in Ireland was different to the war on terror in that it was confined to one country, basically, as I've already said. The prevent strategy is a strategy that obliges teachers and other civil servants to report on their pupils and to report on their employees if they see any form of radicalisation taking place amongst them. There have been infamous cases where the child, for instance, that was reported to police because he said he lived in a terrorist house instead of a terrorist house.
Terrorist house.
Terrorist house. And these type of things. But the other obvious thing is that the point we've touched in already is, what do you mean by radicalisation? If you become opposed to the policy of the British government in bombing Libya and Syria and Iraq back to the Middle Ages, are you then a terrorist sympathiser? And what exactly are British values? And what is whose values are the British values? The British values of the people that imposed famine on Ireland and on Bangladesh in during the Second World War. Are these British values? Are British values the values of the British working class that fights for their rights and fights against that? These acts of imperialism wherever they're shown. I'd mention also that within 2 months the Chilcot inquiry is supposed to be published, and undoubtedly this is going to lay a heavy blame on Tony Blair, and he can't escape. But and an attempt to preempt some of the findings. Back in October, he did admit that the presence of ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria and Iraq was caused by the invasion of Iraq. He said, well, what else can you say? You have to say that. So he's already admitted that, and he's attempting to escape the responsibility. I mention also there's a character called David Aronovich, who I was invited to participate in a BBC programme. They didn't use my interview in the end, but he said at the time that, look, if we don't find, we'd better find those weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, because if we don't, I'll never again believe anything the US State Department tells us, and most importantly, most of the public will never believe it either. Of course, he continues to believe everything that the American State Department says, and the British. He is a pro-Zionist sympathiser, but nonetheless, the Chilcot inquiry will produce an enormous crisis, without a doubt. It's very difficult to see how Blair can escape blame for that, you know.
Yeah, indeed. So let's talk about the British government and how it's been complicit in recycling torture techniques. And I'm talking very specific reference to the Irish case Hooded Men. Can you speak a little bit about this case and refer it to torture techniques that are used in Guantanamo now?
Well, the torture that's referred to of the hooded men was the introduction of internment on the night of August of 1971, where 342 people were arrested in dawn raids, 4 o'clock in the morning. They were pulled in. Most of them were not members of the IRA at all. They were simply people that were civil rights supporters, and they were subjected to absolutely horrific torture at the time. They were, for instance, beaten. They were made to run through lines of soldiers who constantly beat them. They were put in helicopters and told they were going to thrown out from hundreds of feet, where they were actually only 2 feet off the ground. And of course they were hooded. And the hooded men, this type of torture that has now been developed in Guantanamo, to the waterboarding and all these horrific methods of extracting information. Information basically that at a certain stage you will tell them whatever they want you to tell them, because you have to get it to stop. Most people break on them on torture. Some people don't. Some people are prepared to, but the majority of people will break on the dose. And of course, Guantanamo and what happened at Bagram Airport. That is still going on. There are still people held there. Obama has failed to close it down, despite promising he will. And those that have been released from there will tell the horrific tales. And the thing was
So again, just this reference in relation to the British government complicity of torture techniques in the hooded men, and also kind of speaking about recycling those torture techniques in today's climate, in places like Guantanamo and other black sites.
Yes, well, it is. It is clear that in incidents like Abu Ghraib in Iraq, the British continued and developed the methods of torture that they developed there. I would mention also in this regard of British torture that perhaps the most infamous case of British torture of prisoners is what happened in Kenya. The British in Kenya was absolutely diabolical, what they did to those prisoners, and the story only came out because of the case brought by the elderly survivors through the British courts, and we something of the region of 300,000 people were killed, perhaps, according to some estimates, which puts it sort of in line with the practices of the Nazis. The things they did to them, to those prisoners, are absolutely beyond belief. Nothing as bad as that happened in Ireland, although these things were horrific. Or even Abu Ghraib. Now they attacked those Kenyan prisoners with absolute ferocity beyond belief, and attempted to destroy all the records of what they had done, and the methods of torture, which were it is hard to mention what they actually did to those prisoners.
Yeah, because there's not much information that's accessible. So, should we move on to the next question?
Alright, yes.
Okay, so just wrapping up, my question was essentially, some people don't want to support political prisoner campaigns, and they say that they're worried that they could be criminalised. How would you respond to that? And also, people often say to me, Nadia, what's the tangible kind of form of support that you offer as a political prisoner campaigner? Well, actually, there's many ways to respond to that question, and because you're very experienced, I want to know, experienced in the movement, I want to know what advice and outcomes have resulted or have actually what outcomes as a result of political campaigning has assisted political prisoners' liberation, and why is political campaigning important? Because the work you and I do is important, and I just wanted to see what your convincing argument would be.
Well, first of all, for the poorest and most oppressed workers, they will be reluctant to struggle at most times. And they won't support causes that put them in danger until they feel themselves in danger, and there's a political change in the situation, and they decide to fight themselves. Then they will support many causes in those circumstances. And if you look at the periods where the struggle in Ireland or the struggle, international struggles, have got big support, it is when people have been deciding to fight for their own cause, and then they draw the wider picture. I have to say that the biggest political step forward we have made has been on the question of when we every year we would bring our motions to the Labour Representation Committee's annual general meeting. Now, the Labour Representation Committee is a sort of left of the Labour Party movement, but it also contains many other groupings that aren't in the Labour Party, for instance, like the New Communist Party and ourselves. And on the question of the anti-imperialist motions that we would put in support of Irish Republican prisoners, we would put them every year, and every year they were passed. Now, the importance of that was that both Jeremy Corbyn and John MacDonald were leaders of that, and they voted for these motions. And having voted for these motions then, of course they are now abandoning that political stance as far as possible. But I have the minutes of those meetings, and I'm now able to remind them of what they once said and what they once did. It is the reason that we find it very important to try and access the movements of the Labour movement where you get a big response. For instance, I will say openly now, one of the organisations that is part of the Labour Representation Committee is called the Alliance for Workers' Liberty. That is a notorious pro-Zionist organisation, and one year in moving the motion in support of the political prisoners, what they said to me was, look, we suspect that you're not just looking for the democratic rights of these political prisoners. We suspect that you actually support their political aims. And I said in answer, well, I have to confirm your worst suspicions at this point. Tell you that I actually do support their political aims. However, that's not what the motion says. The motion merely calls for support for their democratic rights as prisoners, and that they be treated fairly and be given political status. And on that basis, the motion passed overwhelmingly, as it did every other year. What will happen this year, I don't know. The conference is moved for October. I have been suspended from this organisation as well, charged with anti-Semitism, but they had 42 days to present the charges, and 49 days have now passed since and they haven't presented the charges against me. So I'm now about to consult my solicitor to demand my rights. I was publicly slated as an anti-Semite, and this was put out on the Twitter feed by a number of people, and in my view, that is just totally unacceptable. I hear that
it's disgusting.
It is absolutely disgusting,
especially considering look, there's many people out there, including like the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, who claim to be a supporter of Palestinian liberation. So if anything, he really needs to grow a backbone, and so do the others. But as far, I wouldn't worry. I think it's added to your street credibility.
Well, maybe it has in some areas. But I would, in relation, I would say that the president of Israel, who nobody remembers his name, but anyway, he's got to speak on the name of Israel. He said that there was two forms of anti-Semitism that Jewish people were now facing. There was the right-wing anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe and the left-wing anti-Semitism in the British Labour Party. Now, the right-wing anti-Semites of Eastern Europe, of course, are out-and-out fascists. They think that the Holocaust was a great thing and they'd like to do it again and like to kill every leftist they could get hold of. And publicly say so. They fly the flags of the Nazi collaborator Stefan Bandera and are proud to be called fascists and have committed heinous acts against their opponents. There's nobody at all remotely like that within the British Labour Party. This left-wing anti-Semitism thing is a complete bogus campaign. Ultimately intended to get rid of Corbyn himself, of course, and foolishly he goes along with it and he accepts it. He has set up an inquiry now that basically accepts that it's a problem. No, it's not the problem. The problem within the British Labour Party is the Labour Friends of Israel and the what used to be Pole Zion, which is the Jewish Labour movement, who are part of the Jewish Labour Party, who actually carried out the Nakba themselves in 47-48 and kept the Palestinians under martial law for 18 years afterwards. These are the racist monsters who are now actually charged with educating the British Labour Party about anti-Semitism. Now, it is an outrage beyond belief, in my view.
It's ironic. But relating back to your, it's the prison support group, isn't it, that you set up?
Yes.
So in relation to this, what tangible form of support have you offered? How do we approach this kind of question if asked? Tangible support.
Tangible forms. I don't know. We have managed to, as I say, to gain influence in certain sections of the Labour movement. We have had organised our pickets and our demonstrations and public meetings. We have got many letters from the prisoners themselves expressing their pleasure and solidarity with what we're doing. So therefore we keep the movement going. It's not a very powerful movement at the moment. I'm not pretending that it is. But nonetheless, it does. Sorry?
It's quite disenfranchised, because I was quite surprised, because when I was in Ireland, I expected it to still be very strong, considering the number of detainees still incarcerated. Here in British prisons as well as Northern Ireland and elsewhere. But I was quite surprised that the movement was as strong as it used to be. Why could that be then?
Well, it's strong on occasions. I would say that say mobilisations in Dublin on occasions. On recent occasions have been quite big and quite strong, but the Good Friday Agreement and what is said about the Good Friday Agreement, that it has stopped all this killings and bombings, etc. That is still seen as a plus, and therefore to oppose the Good Friday Agreement by saying, well, of course we don't support the bombing of civilian areas or assassinating individual people of that nature. People think that's what you want to bring back, and until the movement itself develops in the north of Ireland, which it will inevitably do, because the actual Good Friday Agreement is based on a sectarian headcount. And the sectarian headcount makes legitimate the loyalist supremacy, that they are supremacists. They actually think they're better than you. They think they're entitled to more privileges than you, and if they see you advance, or nationalists advancing in any way against them, they're absolutely outraged. They're taking our privileges off it. They didn't want the sons and daughters, for instance, of nationalist workers to be educated properly, because that would mean threatening their jobs and threatening their positions. It's a vile reactionary ideology, and to equate it with the national aspiration to the right to self-determination, which is basically based on equality and not supremacy. You know, when a nation fights for its national liberation, what it wants is equality with everybody else, so that we're as good as you. You know, and and when our football team wins a match, that means our people are as good as your people, etc., etc. That's equality, and to be told that no, you're not entitled to that if you're a Palestinian in Israel, or if you're a nationalist in Ireland, or if you're a black person in South Africa, or in the days gone by, or in the deep south of America. And by the way, those are the four movements that are closest ideologically and politically together historically, with those four. It's a compromise that cannot last.
Record anything?
Yeah, no.
You did record
No,
it?
but this is the button.
All right, okay.
Yeah, that was
Did it record?
Yeah.
Okay, should we start?
Yeah.
Okay, so just wrapping up, my question was essentially, some people don't want to support political prisoner campaigns, and they say that they're worried that they could be criminalised. How would you respond to that? And also, people often say to me, Nadia, what's the tangible kind of form of support that you offer as a political prisoner campaigner? Well, actually, there's many ways to respond to that question, and because you're very experienced, I want to know, experienced in the movement, I want to know what advice and outcomes have resulted, or have actually, what outcomes as a result of political campaigning has assisted political prisoners' liberation, and why is political campaigning important? Because, the work you and I do is important, and I just wanted to see what your convincing argument would be.
Well, first of all, for the poorest and most oppressed workers, they will be reluctant to struggle at most times, and they won't support causes that put them in danger until they feel themselves in danger, and there's a political change in the situation. And they decide to fight themselves, then they will support many causes in those circumstances. And if you look at the periods where the struggle in Ireland, or the struggle, international struggles, have got big support, it is when people have been deciding to fight for their own cause, and then they draw the wider picture. I have to say that the biggest political step forward we have made has been on the question of when we every year we would bring our motions to the Labour Representation Committee's annual general meeting. Now, the Labour Representation Committee is a sort of left of the Labour Party movement, but it also contains many other groupings that aren't in the Labour Party, for instance, like the New Communist Party and ourselves. And on the question of the anti-imperialist motions that we would put in support of Irish Republican prisoners, we would put them every year, and every year they were passed. Now, the importance of that was that both Jeremy Corbyn and John MacDonald were leaders of that, and they voted for these motions. And having voted for these motions then, of course they are now abandoning that political stance as far as possible. But I have the minutes of those meetings, and I'm now able to remind them of what they once said and what they once did. It is the reason that we find it very important to try and access the movements of the labour movement where you get a big response. For instance, I will say openly now, one of the organisations that is part of the Labour Representation Committee is called the Alliance for Workers' Liberty. that is a notorious pro-Zionist organisation, and one year in moving the motion in support of the political prisoners, what they said to me was, look, we suspect that you're not just looking for the democratic rights of these political prisoners. We suspect that you actually support their political aims. And I said in answer, well, I have to confirm your worst suspicions at this point. Tell you that I actually do support their political aims. However, that's not what the motion says. The motion merely calls for support for their democratic rights as prisoners, and that they be treated fairly and be given political status. And on that basis, the motion passed overwhelmingly, as it did every other year. What will happen this year, I don't know. The conference is moved for October. I have been suspended from this organisation as well, charged with anti-Semitism, but they had 42 days to present the charges, and 49 days have now passed since and they haven't presented the charges against me. So I'm now about to consult my solicitor to demand my rights. I was publicly slated as an anti-Semite, and this was put out on the Twitter feed by a number of people, and in my view, that is just totally unacceptable. I hear that
it's disgusting.
It is absolutely disgusting,
especially considering you know, look, there's many people out there, including like the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, who claim to be a supporter of Palestinian liberation. So you know, if anything, he really needs to grow a backbone, and so do the others. But as far, I wouldn't worry. I think it's added to your street credibility.
Well, maybe it has in some areas. But I would, in relation, I would say that the president of Israel, who nobody remembers his name. But anyway, he's got to speak on the name of Israel. He said that there was two forms of anti-Semitism that Jewish people were now facing. There was the right-wing anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe and the left-wing anti-Semitism in the British Labour Party. Now, the right-wing anti-Semites of Eastern Europe, of course, are out-and-out fascists. They think that the Holocaust was a great thing, and they'd like to do it again and like to kill every leftist they could get hold of, and publicly say so. They fly the flags of the Nazi collaborator Stefan Bandera, and are proud to be called fascists, and have committed heinous acts against their opponents. There's nobody at all remotely like that within the British Labour Party. This left-wing anti-Semitism thing is a complete bogus campaign, ultimately intended to get rid of Corbyn himself, of course, and foolishly he goes along with it and he accepts it. He has set up an inquiry now that basically accepts that it's a problem. No, it's not the problem. The problem within the British Labour Party is the Labour Friends of Israel and the what used to be Pole Zion, which is the Jewish Labour movement, who are part of the Jewish Labour Party, who actually carried out the Nakba themselves in 47, 48, and kept the Palestinians under martial law for 18 years afterwards. These are the racist monsters who are now actually charged with educating the British Labour Party about anti-Semitism. Now, it is an outrage beyond belief, in my view.
It's ironic. But relating back to your, it's the prison support group, isn't it, that you set up?
Yes.
So in relation to this, what tangible form of support have you offered? How do we approach this kind of question if asked? Tangible support.
Tangible forms. I don't know. We have managed to, as I say, to gain influence in certain sections of the Labour movement. We have had organised our pickets and our demonstrations and public meetings. We have got many letters from the prisoners themselves expressing their pleasure and solidarity with what we're doing. So therefore we keep the movement going. It's not a very powerful movement at the moment. I'm not pretending that it is, but nonetheless it does. Sorry.
It's quite disenfranchised because I was quite surprised because when I was in Ireland, I expected it to still be very strong considering the number of detainees still incarcerated. You know, here in British prisons as well as Northern Ireland and elsewhere. But I was quite surprised that the movement was as strong as it used to be. Why could that be then?
Well, it's strong on occasions. I I would say that say mobilisations in Dublin on occasions, on recent occasions, have been quite big and quite strong. But the Good Friday Agreement and what is said about the Good Friday Agreement, that it has stopped all this killings and bombings, etc. That is still seen as a plus. And therefore, to oppose the Good Friday Agreement by saying, well, of course, we don't support the bombing of civilian areas or assassinating individual people of that nature, people think that's what you want to bring back. And until the movement itself develops in the north of Ireland, which it will inevitably do, because the actual Good Friday Agreement is based on a sectarian head count, and the sectarian head count makes legitimate the loyalist supremacy, that they are supremacists. They actually think they're better than you. They think they're entitled to more privileges than you, and if they see you advance, our nationalists advancing in any way against them, they're absolutely outraged. They're taking our privileges off it. They didn't want the sons and daughters, for instance, of nationalist workers to be educated properly, because that would mean threatening their jobs and threatening their positions. It's a vile reactionary ideology, and to equate it with the national aspiration of the right to self-determination, which is basically based on equality and not supremacy. You know, when a nation fights for its national liberation, what it wants is equality with everybody else, so that we're as good as you. You know, and when our football team wins a match, that means our people are as good as your people, etc., etc. That's equality, and to be told that no, you're not entitled to that. If you're a Palestinian in Israel, or if you're a nationalist in Ireland, or if you're a black person in South Africa, or in the days gone by, or in the deep south of America. And by the way, those are the four movements that are closest ideologically and politically together, historically. But those four. That it's a compromise that cannot last. They avoided the national question. They said, look, we can have equality here in the north of Ireland. The interment and everything else is no part of the liberation. It's the unity of Ireland. So that the military struggle, it was powerful at certain periods, but its difficulty was that it became increasingly isolated from the mass movements. And when you had mass movements then over, for instance, over the hunger strikes, you didn't have a political leadership that understood how to take that movement forward to overthrow both states. The IRA were organised in what they call in cells, individual cells, and I suppose they had to do that in a certain sense for security, because they were absolutely shot through with informers. So there'd be 6 or 7 here and 6 or 7 there, and they were British informers. Something like a third, apparently, of the Belfast IRA were informers. So yeah. It was a great problem about how to proceed. But I would take inspiration from the periods of mass struggle that show the potential, and you know, when they rose to their peak, they needed political leadership. Of course, political leadership that was prepared to use whatever violence was necessary to defend themselves and their communities. There was no doubt that the insult that was hurled at the IRA back in 1969, that IRA meant I ran away, that was what drove the formation of the provisional IRA, who said at that stage, no, we won't run away, and attempted as best they could to defend their communities against the murderous assaults of the loyalist death squads that were coming in. So you had to respect that, and you know that John MacDonald came under great pressure for saying just that. He said the peace process, although I don't support the peace process, he does, but he said the peace process was brought about by the activities of Bobby Sands and the IRA. And he had to apologise grovelingly for having said such a thing, but it was the obvious truth, you know. You could not. People, the British Army or the British state negotiated the truce and treaty in 1920 because they were actually losing the war. They only ever go to the negotiation table when they're incapable of defeating their enemies. And if they can't defeat them militarily, then they will seek to defeat them politically in the conference table, and frequently they achieve their aims there.
Thanks so much for coming to speak to us today, and solidarity with all the work that you do, and big respect. And also we're looking to publish this interview in